Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Strategy with Jason. Today, I have a very special guest. I have a guest that, you know what, it's funny, from afar, we haven't had a chance to hang out much. But, you know, I've actually been told several times that we are very, very similar. And I was like, you know what? That means we need to hang out. We need to learn a little bit more about each other. So I have the one, the only, the oh so famous Mr. Vasilios Lambos in the house. Vasily, what's up?
Jason, thank you for having me. I've been super thankful to have a lot of accelerated career opportunities throughout my career. Started really in the automotive space through a senior specialist role at Hendrick Automotive, working in their marketing department.
Nice.
And, you know, just through that experience, I've learned that there's a lot of pain points in the automotive industry as a whole. And I really just wanted to solve a lot of the pain points from both a media perspective and embracing kind of a qualitative approach that I think you and I resonate really, really well with.
100%.
And it's that opportunity to really, you know, look at data, you know, try to cover and problem solve for really complicated, you know, media related issues. But at the same time, like, we understand that the dealer audience is tactical, and we're all athletes in the space. And so, you know, I went on to start my own agency, Lambos Digital, with the mindset and the mission to create almost a SWAT team to come in and help dealers better improve their measurement, better improve their media.
And look, I'm excited to jam today. We got some really cool topics. We're going to talk a little bit about Clubhouse and what's that done to our industry, or AKA Crack House. I don't know about you, man, but you got to take a look. Like, I hate getting my screen time notifications now.
Yeah.
You know, 17 and a half hours in Clubhouse. I don't know if that's necessarily a healthy thing, but that's okay. But we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about multi-network marketing strategies, on how it's not just one network's responsibility to actually generate and bring that customer or lead into the dealership. We're actually going to talk about measurement. What the hell is that? And how the hell do we actually do it? So that's going to be fun. All right. We're going to also cover defining real marketing KPIs. We're talking about real ones, right? Operationally based KPIs and ROI. So, man, we have a lot of topics to jump into, and it's so cool to be able to connect with you. I find that, you know, for a lot of us, there's only three ways we get into this industry, right? And that's one, we stumbled our way in. Two, we were born into it, which doesn't sound like you were. Or three, you get conned into it, which is kind of how I got into it. So like, it's cool to have you here. There's a lot of great topics. Let's start off talking about Clubhouse. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions, man. Like, what do you think Clubhouse is going to do, and how's it going to affect the automotive industry?
I think it's an amazing thing for the automotive industry. My take at like 1,000 foot, you know, looking down. And personally, I don't have a huge following. I've never had a huge following on Instagram, Twitter, but Clubhouse, in a unique way, has democratized information for people who may not have been as vocal, you know, in the social media space prior. And I think for an industry that a lot of times, at least this is my perspective, we like to hold information to our, you know, close and tight. And we, because of politics, because of, you know, the structure and how even large automotive groups operate, it's hard sometimes to share ideas in a way that cascades through the organization very fluidly. And so Clubhouse, just to hop in a room and get everybody at all levels of the operation, from president to marketer to sales rep, all in the same room talking about the same issues, I think we're going to problem solve really, really fast on a platform like Clubhouse. And to get all those different viewpoints is a really powerful thing. I think the best level of innovation occurs when we're all in the same room and we're sharing opinions, right or wrong. And it's been an amazing couple of weeks just diving in deep, investing a ton of time into Crack House, Clubhouse. You know, I think my sleeping schedule now is sort of
right?
Adjusted.
No, you know what? I love what people are when they're talking about kind of in the industry. It's like I love networking events. I love networking events, and very sad in the last 12 months haven't been able to attend many of those or even put some on like I do myself. And because I find some of the conversations that happen in the halls or the conversation that you're having over a drink is some of the most impactful conversations, and it brings not only insight but also new strategies and ideas, and they just haven't had a place to do that. So when I first got my invite, I was like, hell yeah, I'm in. Like, it was just a network. In fact, actually, I'll be honest, the first week was really bad. It was 32 hours I spent in the
Wow.
first week. Now, a lot of that was because it was on in the background. Like, I wasn't actively talking for 32 hours, but it was on, and I was just listening and just consuming and stuff like that, to the point now where I actually have two phones. So I have like one phone for work, and then I now have, this is my clubhouse phone. And it just sits over here so that I can have those conversations. But I think it's really cool because for a lot of management team who doesn't get the chance to go to some of these big NADA or the digital dealer or the driving sales events, right? They're in there listening to the same speakers that would have been there in the first place. So I actually think it's really cool for that management level to start to have those conversations and to get that education. Um, I think, one of the topics that have been pretty popular right now in excuse me, in Clubhouse has been around marketing strategies. And, I know that, I've been in some rooms, you've been in some rooms. We were just talking before we start recording about Bob Lanham and some of his viewpoints, and what an amazing guy he is, right? Bob's just an
Love,
amazing guy,
love Bob.
for someone who, is at Facebook, but willing to say that it's not just Facebook to be a part of your strategy. You need to have more. Right. So I've found that, multi-network marketing strategies have been a pretty popular conversation kind of in clubhouses, but I'd love to kind of get your thoughts. Like, how do you define a multi-network marketing strategy for anybody out there that's watching and listening right now?
So being mainly on the paid media side, when I think of omni-channel and I think of a multi-channel approach, it's really how we define and identify our media mix and allocating the right amount of media, the right amount of budget to channels that are going to drive the best value for the business. And so you can measure that value through return on ad spend. You can measure the ROI. I think there's a lot of dealerships today that are overweight in certain channels that are not providing, or even certain campaigns that are not providing enough return on investment for the dealership. And so identifying what those channels are and shifting your media model on not just a monthly basis, but an annualized basis is also really important. And, I'd like to say qualitatively, right, dealerships have like 12 holidays out of the year, whether it's a red tag sale event or, I think about it as like 12 key Super Bowl days or weekends that dealers can really operationalize against. And looking at your media in the context of your key events, your key business drivers throughout the year, I think is super, super important.
For sure, it is. And that's actually a good point. It's like the manufacturers have their voice, but the dealerships really need to find their own voice. And I find that dealership like sales events are great places to start doing that. But the problem I run into in a lot of these events or campaigns that are run is that there wasn't really clearly defined goals and objectives before we actually did it. It's just because it was a good idea. You know what? I got to be honest with you, Vasilios. I hate good ideas. I legitimately hate them. You've been in a bunch of marketing meetings. I have too. I'll be in a boardroom and someone, very innocently will say, "Hey, I got a good idea." And I'm like, "Oh crap, here it comes." And you know what it is? It's going to be something that they saw that was really cool. It was fancy. It was special. It was something like that. But then the problem is that if the good idea is not deeply rooted in a goal and an objective, then it just becomes a good idea and it just fizzles out over time. So I gotta be honest with you, because we're in the same boat. I spend more time with dealers talking about defining real goals and objectives for each of their campaigns or events or whatever it is, right? Then I actually ended up ever talking about the marketing. I'm curious, do you find the same thing? Do you end up spending more time talking about goals and objectives than you do about marketing?
I do. And I would also add to that, I think that the way that you position the conversation with the dealership and communicate about marketing is really important. And one thing that I think about when we're talking about media planning specifically is and lining the media plan up with key objectives.
Mm-hmm.
I think today, at least on the Facebook front, we've been heavily focused on making very deliberate decisions on what our key KPI is at all levels for the dealer. And that can be month to month. It can also change, as you've seen with COVID-19, where inventory, restraints and pain points start to have a profound impact on how dealers can hold more gross and so forth. And so that has a direct impact to the media dollars that they're willing to spend and how they're thinking about media. And so being able to pivot, right, and having the fluidity in your budget is a key component. I would also add that dealers have a huge opportunity to define also their brand promise in the market. Yes. And a lot of times being a tier 3 dealer and having a lot of pressure and influence from the OEM, we sometimes suppress, meaning the dealer suppresses their own personality and value proposition at the local level that could be lifted and utilized in their advertising efforts with the proper creative and the right message. And so I think when we think about our media, we want to align our campaigns and objectives to be very deliberate in defining our brand promise and defining what our goals and KPIs are for the month or for the year, as all the market environments are sort of brewing and changing. And I think now is the best time. I think if anything, COVID advanced our ability to move and be more agile with how we think about media, as opposed to leaving things on autopilot or not taking media and looking at it and prioritizing some of these topics.
That's so true. You know what? I hate to say it, but there's still a lot of dealers out there that are just checking out the proverbial box. Like, check, I got it done. Like, check, I'm running my display ads. Check, I'm running my VIN-specific Facebook marketplace ads. Check. And that's it, right? I feel like, but to your point, this last 12 months, I think, has been a big eye opener. I hate to identify silver linings during a pandemic, but you're right. This is definitely kind of one of those silver linings, is that I think dealers are taking strategy a lot more serious now. They're realizing that it is their product is not enough of a story for a consumer to want to choose to do business with you. I think consumers are looking for stories before they're looking for products. And let's talk about that, because I still think there's a lot of dealerships out there that don't have. I want to dive deeper into what you're talking about. Multiple strategies. It's not one strategy. We're talking about omni-channel and multiple networks and multiple channels, but really what we're even talking about, we have to even go farther than that. There are multiple strategies that need to be run all the time, right? So anybody out there that's watching and listening right now and running a dealership or management or own a dealership, whatever it is, what advice can you give to them about, different strategies that should be run on a regular basis?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And I would just take a step back. I would say, look at your media mix, look at your media efforts holistically. And when you're looking at your objectives for the month, simplify it. A lot of times I use the word segmentation for audience management, and we're segmenting audiences and we're thinking through how to line up personalization with our media efforts, right? And what I mean by personalization is serving the right ad to the right consumer at the right time. And when we take a step back and we evaluate that, there's really simple strategies to create creative and ad campaigns that line up with your fixed or variable operation objectives. And so I think, for any dealer manager or GM or internet marketing manager, anybody who's handling or is a stakeholder in the process, is look at it holistically and be deliberate also about what media dollars are making the most impact. The two core KPIs for that, or metrics, is your cost per lead or cost per acquisition, right? And ensuring that you're not acquiring leads into a specific funnel or component of your business that is just outrageously high. And so, from an efficiency standpoint, efficiency, I'm not a marketer who looks at efficiency in some cases. And if it's not profitable 1 month, right, you just turn it off. I think efficiency is going to have a lot of fluidity as well. And some months you may be paying a higher price for a consumer that is going to have a longer lifetime value for your business on say a 12-month window. And so I would just be very mindful of, as you're looking at your media efforts, to also be considerate of the intent and the type of consumer that you're going after. And they're really simple concepts that, if done well, you've got campaigns that are lined up for each core objective, and it's set up. The account structure we talk about a lot is set up in a way that it scales and has the levers that you can pull month to month to really start to flex your budget, and you don't get caught in areas where you're overweight or overspending in a category that is just not profitable, and there ends up being a lot of waste.
No, you're 100% right. And I think the more time that we spend developing out those goals, then we get away from that waste. And there's a lot of waste there, right? Look, we need to have a goal around lead generation, acquisition, all right? We need to have a goal around retention. There has to be a goal in a campaign that's associated with it, that's always consistently running. That's one thing that's always kind of dumbfounded me in the automotive industry, is loyalty campaigns, right? Like it's a loyalty event. What do you mean? Loyalty only happens once a quarter? What the hell is that? It's always freaking there. Why the hell we tried to shove it into this private event, which is not so private, by the way. Anyways, I'll get off that soapbox because I can go on that one for a while. But we have to be running multiple goals all the time. There's also the goal around just culture. Like, I think there has to be a culture goal within the marketing as well. Like, people want to understand your culture. They want to be a part of that culture. They want to buy into that culture. Well, if you're not marketing it, they don't know. I remember I was sitting down with a group of Chrysler dealerships. And of course, there was always that one guy. You know that one guy in the room, right? Oh, those internet people. I'm like, oh, gosh. Internet people, eh? like they're different human beings. Like they're aliens of some kind, right? And he's like, well, all they care about is price. Well, it's not my first rodeo. I've been down this rabbit hole a few times, so I decided to go down the rabbit hole with them, right? So I'm like, okay, fair enough. All right, I'll agree with you. That's all they care is about price. But let's take a look at what your marketing efforts have been for the last 12 months. And sure enough, every single piece of creative put out there had to do with nothing but the lowest freaking price humanly possible. Look, our marketing defines who our audience is. If the only message we're telling them is that we're going to be the best price no matter what, well, why would you be surprised that is what people are coming in and actually asking for and only give a crap about? But that's what I'm saying. I feel like the strategy I like to do is define what the goal is, right? Then define the audience that's going to help you meet and achieve that goal. Then define the creative that's actually appropriate for the audience, right? You were talking about earlier, and I love the fact you said it, because we don't do this too often. A lot of times we create creative for ourselves and not for our audience. And our creative has to be for the audience. And that means that you're going to have multiple audiences. Like, you're not going to have one audience that's going to provide you leads, right? You're going to have new customers. You're going to have existing customers. And then within those categories, you're going to have multiple demographics and multiple places and multiple offers. So it's like, I feel like we got to get away as an industry. We got to get away from checking off these stupid proverbial boxes and get serious about it. And that kind of goes into our next topic, which is really about measurement, right? You kicked it off really well in your last statement. Is like, how do we measure all that? How do we put that all together? And it's not enough that we're just looking at attribution, right? Or lead generation, right? It's like, we got to take a look at the measurement of the ad engagement and how that affects the website engagement. And then how does that affect the in-dealership engagement? Like, if you really want to knock this out of the park, anybody out there watching and listening, you want to knock this out of the park, all right, you got to look at all three of those stories. And you got to make sure all three of those stories actually say the same thing. But then the question goes is, how do we do that? So that's going to be my question now for you, is how do we connect the dots between ads, website, and in-dealership? And how do we measure that?
I think it's such an interesting topic for automotive, and I'm preaching to the choir. I think many dealerships and the people who are at the dealership involved with digital marketing feel like they have not so much a messy kind of landscape, digital landscape, but the industry has sort of tacked on widgets, third parties, and a lot of different funnels that are, frankly, from a technical standpoint, hard to measure. And I don't want to make it an attribution conversation, because there's still ways that dealerships can consolidate and get all of their data and their information in one place. And so I think if you have an issue with identifying who the quote unquote source of truth is from a data perspective, that's the first problem you want to solve. Once you feel confident and that the source of data is in the right place, then we get into defining what those KPIs are for the business. Mm-hmm. I think the automotive industry as a whole could do a lot better job of identifying what those hard conversions are for each business or vertical or service line, right? You want to know what your variable operation leads look like from a funnel perspective. You want to know where your fixed ops leads are being generated. You want to differentiate when you're getting a chat lead versus a website lead. Exactly. And backing into that all the way full funnel. So from the first impression to the engagement to the lead. And I think if dealerships can really focus on solving for that in the immediate term, they're going to be very successful. And then it makes everything from a measurement side just that much easier. But it's a commitment. Yeah, I think you said it earlier, where it was talking about how dealers need to have the commitment to change and the commitment to hold themselves accountable. And when you made the example of how ad creative sort of, you see a lot of ad fatigue where all we're pushing is price. And it kind of reminded me of a situation where there's dealerships who are actually operating inefficiently, but they're also not profitable because they immediately go to knock the price off of certain inventory or lower their pricing on specific inventory that maybe they don't need to. They can present it to another audience that would be willing to pay a higher price and also pay for a better experience. And so be diligent, right, with the measurement strategy so that you're looking at your media dollars, you're looking at the KPIs and the funnel that consumer is coming into, and you're driving the best amount of, or you're positioning that in a way that's going to be most profitable for the dealership. And I think I exist because there's a lot of inefficiency in the market in these key areas. And so, again, it's not an attribution conversation, but attribution is still really important to know exactly what you're measuring and having connecting the dots view in one place.
Exactly. And it's like, hey, we could do a whole podcast on attribution and we go down that rabbit hole in a big way, right?
Right.
And honestly, I'm not a big fan of really kind of focusing on the attribution. I'm looking at because each campaign requires different KPIs, and it's like, how do I connect the dots, right? And, it's very difficult to connect those dots if the goal and objective was never defined in the first place, right? I love the fact that you were saying about payment. Oh my gosh. You've been in the business for a while. I've been in the business for a while. It's like whenever you go to a dinner party and they find out you're in the automotive business, whoa, here comes the story. Well, let me tell you. I'm like, oh God, okay, here it comes, right? But I'll tell you something super interesting about that. Out of all those dinner parties I've been to and all those situations I've been to, I've yet never had someone tell me about the $256 biweekly vehicle they bought. Not once. No one's ever come out and said, let me tell you about this $250 biweekly car I bought last week. Oh yeah, how'd it go? It never comes up. But that is where we spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a year as an industry focusing on that's the freaking message. Look, once they buy the car, they don't give a shit. That's not the message that they care about, right? They're going to tell me about the experience. And it's like, so they care more about the experience, but we market more about the price. It seems like this is all backwards. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have pricing in our marketing efforts at some point in time, but it's not all about that. So I want to dive a little farther into that and this is really kind of, now we're talking about, marketing yourself, right? And that experience. For dealers out there that are listening and watching right now, all right, what are some strategies that you would recommend about marketing what makes them unique?
That's probably my favorite question because the real nerd comes out when you ask me that question. And the first 3 core campaigns that every dealership should leverage on a platform like Facebook is enabling a why buy campaign, right? That's your brand awareness campaign. That's defining your message at the local level. The second one is supplementing that with automotive inventory ads, right? We still need to show and move the metal that we have. And Facebook has made it extraordinarily easy to set that up, leveraging your feed and getting that inventory on the platform in a very cohesive manner, and testing into different formats and different placements to see what's going to drive the most view through attribution, the most view through success. And I think Facebook does a great job there. I think the measurement is still able to give us a pulse on what our return on ad spend looks like offline for people who see your vehicle on Facebook and then end up in the showroom. The third campaign is CRM, right?
Exactly.
It's using your first party data. And we see this all the time. Dealers have a ton of customer data, and all they have to do is take that data, create audiences, and you can go after lease equity on your own. You don't need a vendor for that. You can do it yourself, right? And you can go after people who have purchased but have not serviced their vehicle. You can create those custom audiences and then create the creative, right?
Yes.
And line that up together to create an experience that the consumer is 9 times out of 10, they're not only gonna convert better, but they're gonna come into the dealership and they're gonna have that message ready. They're gonna be easier, they're gonna be warmer for the sales team and the dealership to convert in store as well.
For sure, 100%. And like, I think from a creative perspective, actually, let me back up a little bit first thing. We've lost a lot of targeting when we're talking about audience and audience developments. Like, it's like, I love the fact that you're talking about first party data, because we have to focus a lot more on that now than ever. And if we were to identify another silver lining over the last 12 months, even though this has nothing to do with the pandemic at all, is the fact that we've lost a lot of that very specific, demographic targeting, is now going to force us to be better in the actual creative that we put out there. It's not enough that we just put an F-150 out there that says $167 biweekly. It's not enough. It's not going to work, right? We do have to dig deeper in our creative message. And there's something that I've been kind of playing with. I'd love to kind of actually get your thoughts on this as well. Is we spend obscene amount of money. Right? I mean, we're talking ridiculous amount of money on messages that only have a 30-day shelf life. And I really struggle with that, right? I mean, look, there's a reason why I do all this branding. This podcast that we're doing right now won't have a 30-day shelf life, right? We'll be able to pull up pieces from this podcast 5 years from now. We'll do like a throwback Thursday. And remember when we had this conversation? like why are dealers not? Why are we still in our marketing efforts embracing these short shelf life strategies? And, how do we get, the dealers that are listening right now to embrace marketing as a marathon and develop out long form strategies? Like, what kind of advice do you have for that?
I would be I would start by saying we are conditioned in automotive from a dealer perspective to think short term.
Exactly.
Think new car objectives, right? We have a lot of pressure to move inventory, and we're conditioned to operationalize in the short term. Marketing, however, and thinking about your customer lifetime value is a long game. And so dealerships and GMs and stakeholders there who are passionate or wanting to learn how to increase the lifetime value of their customer, when they're operationalizing things like their brand and they're defining their message, you need to think about it long term. You need to think about how you're creating your creative content, and you're thinking about your brand message, your positioning, even at the local level with your communities. What do you want your community to think of you long term, right?
Exactly.
How do you want to keep that consistency? And dealerships who get this right, it makes everything else fall into place, because there are dealerships that have, I think, really unique brand opportunities and really unique messages that they can only do in their local market, right? Thinking about a dealership who may be in a rural environment versus more of a metropolitan area or a city. They're going to
100%.
have different messages because they're dealing with consumers who have vastly different lifestyle, right? And so you can line up your messaging really in a creative way, but you need to think long term. And when you look at your data, it's the same applies. Don't just look at the month over month goal. Look at it year over year. Look at it at that data long term, and really try to define the KPIs. Very diligent to thinking about your messaging long term. So, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but a lot of our dealerships are thinking short term, and we come in there and it becomes a change management exercise to say, let's think about our messaging as if we had a customer who bought a car 3 years ago and they forgot about us, and we want to remind them that, hey, we're here, right?
Yes.
How are we going to show you or show the consumer that we still exist and we have a consistent message for our brand?
Well, you know what though? I think you nailed it on the head when you used the word content. Like if you think about it, all right, think about the difference when I say the word ad versus the word content. Like we, as an industry, we have to get away of thinking about ads, all right? And we have to look at ourselves as content creators. And every single dollar that we put out there is an opportunity to create a piece of content that someone can engage with. So, actually, something I've been pushing a lot for lately, and I gotta be honest, I'm not getting a whole lot of buy-in, which is kind of upsetting, but I'll keep pushing for it, right? Is I want dealers to start carving out like budgets for things that I call social worthiness. Something they do or create or have that is something that is socially worthy of sharing or talking about or engaging with. Too often, I think, ads talk at people. $199 biweekly, 0% financing, huge discounts. Like, that's what ads do. Content doesn't, though. Content encourages people to come in, have a conversation, be a part of something, share this because someone else will get a kick out of it, right? So, what advice can you give to dealers to change that mindset, to stop thinking about ads and start thinking more about content? And do you agree that we should be carving out a budget for what I call social worthiness strategies?
We're conditioned to sell, right? And so
Yeah.
that's why you see a lot of that price-driven, offer-driven offers. They may convert really, really well in the short term, but in the long term, does it build your brand equity? Does it build value to the consumer? And I would ask that question: is the content that you're designing and you're generating providing value, right? And with a lot of our automotive audiences, people, 70% of people are shopping, right?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, it's and especially nowadays where technology is really advanced, I would argue that vehicles have a harder time, whether it's Mercedes or BMW, they all have Apple CarPlay. They all are competing on those features. And so as the consumer thinks about the industry and thinks about the auto industry in more of a brand agnostic manner, defining your brand promise is going to be more important, right? And so 100%. When you think about brand promise, think about Carvana, 7-day test own. Now that's hard to do at a tier 3, for a tier 3 dealership. However, you can create your own messaging that's consistent and back your content and ask yourself, is the ad, in this case, right? Are the ads that we're putting out there and investing so heavily in, are we giving value to the consumer in a way that they're going to not only convert, but they're going to remember us and remember our brand and remember what our value proposition is? Exactly.
And you know what? Look, I think everything we're talking about now is, especially kind of around having a content marketing. I gotta be honest with you, I've had the opportunity to be in thousands of dealerships, talk to many, many operators out there. And, I always like to identify, the key, handful of key things that are consistent with the top 1% of all the dealers that are really executing well. I mean, not just from a profitability perspective, but from a culture perspective, from a marketing perspective, from operations and everything. And one of the things I do find is that they do embrace a content strategy in addition to an advertising strategy and making sure that there's a mix there. But I think for dealers to get to that place, all right, they need to take responsibility for their own marketing education. Like it's 2021. right? Like the resources out there, podcasts we're doing, that thousands of marketing podcasts and audiobooks and everything. I just don't think there's an excuse anymore for a dealership not to know, all right, what is available out there as far as marketing strategies and content strategies. And what are your thoughts on that?
I struggle with this. And so this isn't just like a, hey, you dealer, you struggle with this, but this is, I think it goes back to learning and development, or L&D. I always talk about, even on Clubhouse and to my existing network in the automotive space. You need to do a better job of taking the metrics and the nitty gritty technical components of marketing and educating people in the dealership, educating our teams, collaborating and sitting at the table together and creating the methodology. Like you said, all of this information, everybody has a methodology and a perspective, a lens at which they're looking at, when they think about their marketing and their success.
For sure.
That fluidity can be even more understood if we all have kind of a fundamentals of marketing 101 concept defined. And I think dealers sometimes are conditioned to just, outsource, say, oh, we're paying you, you handle it, drive opportunity to our dealership. But if they start to actually, if they're getting involved and they're collaborating and they're conscious, they're making a commitment to learn, they're going to actually be able to tell and inform their partners that they work with how to better improve their business.
Exactly.
And I think align those goals and KPIs.
Now, I'm curious, for dealers out there that may be watching this right now and shaking their head and go, yeah, you know what? I agree. I do need to get better. I need to educate myself. All right. Where would you recommend someone start? Is there, do you have a particular favorite book or a podcast, or, how can someone kind of kick off their marketing education?
Yeah. So I would definitely look at, if it's paid media related, Google and Facebook have some open source resources, such as Google's Skillshop, and Facebook has a dealer playbook. And Bob Lanham, I plug to him. He has amazing resources for that as well.
He's such an approachable person. You just ask him about it, he's there.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a Facebook group, the Facebook Auto Marketing Collective. And that's just a great group where you can ask questions, get involved. I'm in that group. You can ask me and reach out to me personally. We have a ton of presentations and educational materials. We'll show you how the auction dynamics work, for example. We'll show you how to think about media buying from a little bit more of a technical perspective, and really help define the lens, right? This is how you can look at your data, and this is how we operationalize against our marketing.
That's awesome. I actually think that's a great place to start. That's I forgot about that Facebook group, and that's an awesome one for everyone out there that's watching and listening. You need to go be a part of that Facebook group, and get into Clubhouse. If you got an iPhone, get into Clubhouse. If you don't have an iPhone, go get one. Like, I don't really care. It's worth it. I'll be honest with you, it's worth it. The amount of wealth of knowledge and insights in there is just absolutely amazing. Hey, Vasily, I know it's getting towards the tail end of our time today, and I'm confident we could probably go for a whole nother hour on these topics. But man, we've covered some amazing things. And I think at the core of everything that we've covered, it comes back to dealers really taking ownership of their goals and objectives so that they can work backwards towards the marketing KPIs and developing out the ROIs and understanding, the multiple network strategies or omni-channel strategies, how that all kind of gets into it. But if we don't have that clear direction, your marketing never has clear direction. It just kind of goes, it goes all over the place, right? And dealers, I think you nailed it on the head. You need to take ownership of your marketing education. You have to own that. It's like I was saying earlier, it's 2021. It's unacceptable that you don't know some of the things we're talking about. I know I'm giving a little tough love, but I've been there, I've been the dealer principal. I've sat at that desk. All right. I've had vendors come in and open my eyes to some amazing things, but also try to sell me some serious snake oil. And it was because of my education that I had about marketing, I was able to make educated decisions, and that truly benefited my business. But before I let you go, Vasily, for everyone out there watching and listening that really enjoyed our conversation, would love to kind of continue this conversation or connect with you or follow along with your social journey, what is the best way to connect with you?
So first off, I think our website, we post, I personally write posts and resources for marketing at lambosdigital.com. You can also find me directly on LinkedIn at Vasilios Lambos, and I'd be more than happy to audit and provide free insights. And so those are the two best ways of contacting me, and just picking my brain on anything from, hey, our marketing vendor, we're not sure we understand the data we're looking at. Or, hey, can you help something more minuscule, such as connecting your Facebook page and your ad account together? So I'm available pretty much on Clubhouse, right? Every other day, in between meetings. So Clubhouse, super important. You can find me there as well at Vasilios Lambos. So thank you so much, Jason, for your time today.
Hey, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for hanging out and jamming with me today. You have yourself an amazing day.
You too.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy with Jason podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to check out the full podcast library at strategywithjason.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Happy podcasting.